What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to my Tribbie pre-release guide. In this video, we will cover everything there is to know about Tribbie, her best icons, her best builds, her playstyles, her best teammates, and what vertical investment you should, if any, apply to your Tribbie. If you enjoy this type of content, let me know by liking the video, leaving a comment in the comment section below, and consider subscribing to the channel. Also, I have been live on Twitch doing account reviews, so if you are interested in getting your account reviewed, there is a link in the description for you to sign up. I've yapped long enough, let's get right into the video. Let's briefly go over Tribbie's kit since she's had a few changes since we last talked about it. To start, Tribbie is an HP scaling character that focuses on massively buffing the entire party and simultaneously dealing damage herself via additional damage and follow-up attacks. Most of her personal damage contribution comes from her additional damage since it triggers once per enemy hit. This means that for her personal damage output, the more enemies you hit with a certain attack, the higher the damage output for Tribbie. Tribbie's follow-up attack launches whenever any ally launches an ultimate. This is Tribbie's second best way of dealing damage because if you time your ults correctly, you can have a seemingly endless stream of follow-up attacks coming from Tribbie. The only caveat is that this has a limit of one follow-up attack launched per ally ultimate, and this refreshes every time Tribbie launches her own ultimate. Aside from that, she gives a massive 30% vulnerability to the entire team and a 20% res pen, pretty much at 100% uptime. In a vacuum, this increases your team's damage output by roughly 70%. And this applies to every single team in the game because those multipliers apply to every source of damage that you can possibly deal. Her basic attack is an HP scaling blast attack that hits 3 enemies. Her skill gives a 24% all type res pen to the entire party and lasts for 3 of Tribbie's turns. This works pretty much exactly like Ruanmei's skill. Now for her ultimate, which is arguably Tribbie's best part, does AoE damage and creates a zone in which enemies take 30% increased damage, which would be a vulnerability, and enables Tribbie's additional damage to hit the enemies with the highest HP one time per target hit. So for example, if you do an AoE attack and you hit 5 enemies, the enemy with the highest amount of HP out of those 5 enemies will take 5 instances of additional damage. It's important to know that this additional damage can also crit, so keep that in mind. Having a high crit rate on your Tribbie is very important for this part of damage since it is where Tribbie contributes the most of her damage. Her talent allows her to launch a follow-up attack every time an ally uses an ultimate. Like I said before, this only triggers once per ally and only once per Tribbie ultimate, so you have to refresh it by launching a Tribbie ultimate. And I know this is the part where a lot of people kind of get lost and they're like, oh, well, Tribbie sucks because you can't spam. But I'll explain later on in the video how this is actually not a big of a deal. Lastly, we have her technique, which allows Tribbie to start with her skill active for 3 turns. And this is essentially the same as Ruanmei. Ruanmei has her technique in which you activate it, you start off with her skill already active. This is pretty much the same thing. The only difference is that you don't gain the energy the same way you do with Ruanmei. But other than that, you start off with Tribbie's skill. Now, Tribbie's traces are really important, especially the first one. And this one allows Tribbie to start off with her ultimate almost maxed out. You have to do very little work to get your first ultimate off because of this trace, because of the energy you gained initially from this trace. This trace also allows Tribbie to keep getting more ultimates really fast because per enemy hit, Tribbie is also going to gain 1.5 energy, and this also gets affected by energy recharge rate. So if you attack a full board of enemies, you will be getting around 9 energy. This trace alone allows Tribbie to launch very frequent ultimates, helping her maintain uptime on all of her team-wide buffs and also her follow-up counts. Her second trace allows her to increase her max HP by a 9% of the total max HP of the entire team, and this includes herself. This also tells you that she wants other high HP teammates to make the most out of that 9% increase. So characters like Fu Xuan, like Blade, like Huahua, or Mighty when he comes out are all very good characters to increase Tribbie's personal damage and her max HP. Tribbie's third trace increases her personal damage dealt by 72% per follow-up attack launched, and each of those 72% increases lasts for 3 turns. So if in one Tribbie's turn you get 3 follow-up attacks, which should be really easy to do, you will have a 216% damage bonus on your Tribbie pretty much at all times, because once you ultimate and launch another follow-up attack, you pretty much are going to keep refreshing them as you go along. And I'm going to get ahead of myself here a little bit, and this trace alone is the reason why getting an HP orb instead of a quantum damage orb is probably going to be a lot better, because you are going to get a lot of damage bonus from this trace. Let's talk about trace priority, and Tribbie is a character that you really want to max everything out maybe except her basic. You don't have to max out her basic, but everything else you kind of want to get. And if you want an order in which to get it, I would say focus on the ultimate first, then the skill and the first trace, and then everything else except the basic. This will make sure that at least your ultimate and your skill and trace 1, which are the most important parts, are already taken care of, and then you can slowly build up the rest as you go. To talk about Tribbie's build, we have to talk about Tribbie's playstyle because her builds highly depend on the playstyle that you intend of playing your Tribbie. And this also applies to the Lycon, because one of the Lycons we are going to discuss is a play style on its own. So I'm just going to give you the play style and then how to build for that specific play style. First up, we got slow Tribbie, and this is as intended Tribbie. Tribbie is a character who is intended to be a slow character, so her buffs can last longer on the rest of the team. This build will also maximize Tribbie's personal damage because we are going to try to maximize the HP that you build on the Tribbie. For this particular playstyle, the new Poet set is the best in slot. It decreases your speed, and at the same time, it gives you 10% quantum damage and also gives you up to 32% crit rate, which is the equivalent of running a crit rate body. And we already touched how important it is to build crit rate on your Tribbie because her additional damage does crit. So if you have issues rolling into crit rate, then you can also do a crit rate body here, and then you essentially have 64% free crit rate right there just by running this set. But using that same logic, this set allows Tribbie to run an HP chest if you have decent enough crit rate rolls. So if you're able to maximize your crit while running an HP chest, you should be doing that because more HP, more damage. You can also run slow Tribbie with the original quantum set for the extra 20%, 10 to 20% defense ignore. However, you are going to want to run a crit rate chest on this one since you don't have the option of getting the extra crit rate from the 4-piece relic set. As far as planar says, the current available best in slot for this type of playstyle is going to be the Inert Salsoto because it does increase your crit rate, it does increase your follow-up attack and your ultimate damage as well. So it pretty much covers all the bases that you need for your Tribbie. You can also run Lushaka for the supportive capabilities and because it also gives you 5% energy regen, and you also want to do your ultimate as much as you can, so 5% energy regen, it is also very good to have. By the way, that's the one I'm running currently because I'm going to farm the next set that I'm going to talk about, which is the Bone Collector set. This is a new set we will get with the release of Tribbie, and this increases your max HP by 12% and increases her crit damage by 28% when your HP is above 5,000. This is 100% Tribbie's best in slot for this type of playstyle, so whenever you do eventually grind up this one or farm this one up, you might as well go ahead and switch it whenever you get the chance. The main stats you want to aim for this particular setup, as I said before, if you are going for the Poet set, I would suggest trying to get the HP chest in there. If not, if you can't get the crit rate where you need it to be, then obviously do the crit rate chest. The boots are obviously going to be HP as well as the orb. Like I said before, the third trace in which she maxes out essentially her damage bonus, you don't want to keep adding on damage bonus because it's going to give you diminishing returns at some point. So you might as well just maximize your HP instead of adding a 38 damage bonus to your already super high 216 damage bonus. And then finally, you have the rope. Here you can make a choice. If you have an energy driven light cone, like for instance her signature light cone or meshing cogs, you can actually get away with running an HP rope. However, if you are running a light cone like Dance 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 or Planetary Rendezvous, then I really recommend running the energy regen rope because it actually makes a difference and you will get your ultimate essentially one whole action earlier. I have an entire video covering Tribbie's energy requirements in the channel, so go ahead and check that out. It's somewhere, I'm going to put it somewhere over here, so just click that video if you're more curious about her energy requirements. All right, her second playstyle is going to be a Dance 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 ult spam Tribbie, and as this suggests, the icon you want to be using on this particular setup is going to be Dance Dance Dance, and the goal for this build is to trigger Dance 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 as much as possible by firing off as many ultimates as possible. And this playstyle is only available to us because of the rework Tribbie got on her first trace that gives us 1.5 energy per enemy hit. This trace skyrockets Tribbie's energy production, and she's able to ult pretty much every turn, and thus she can spam Dance 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 pretty much just as good as HMC can. You can use several 4 pieces for this, so the only goal that you really want to achieve here is to have at least 144 speed, and as you guessed it, you are going to run speed boots on this, so your HP is going to take a slight of a hit. But as far as relic sets go, you can run a 4-piece quantum with a little faster setup. You can run the eagle set because every time you fire off an ultimate, you action advance yourself, and this adds up to the Dance 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 action advance. So she will be getting her turns a lot quicker, which means more energy. And then if you don't have either of those two, you can run the 2-piece messenger and the 2-piece of Kratos for a 12% extra speed. Any of those 3 combinations would work. Just make sure that she has at least 144 speed because this will allow you to have 5 actions in the first 3 cycles, which is very, very important for those people who are trying to clear in that amount of time. For planar sets, you can frankly go for any of the 5% energy planar sets, which is the Von Walk, Penacony, or the Luchaka. But the best one in my opinion is going to be the Von Walk, because if you are over 120 HP, you're going to get a 40% action advance, and that coupled with you being a little faster, you're pretty much going to get turn 1 immediately, and then your first basic is going to get your first ult a lot quicker since you are not running a energy light cone. So this is actually very important. If you are going to maximize this playstyle, I would heavily suggest going into Von Walk rather than the other two. Now you still need your Tribbie to have at least 5k HP. So for this particular main stat setup, you are going to want to run a HP chest, speed boots, HP orb, and then energy regen rope, because this is pretty much necessary because you want to max out your energy as much as possible. This one is a little bit more strict than the previous build, but it works really well. This is very good for Pure Fiction, very good for Apocalyptic Shadow, and then for MOC, for those people who want to squeeze in more actions in the least amount of cycles possible, for 0 cycles or 1 cycles, this setup works phenomenally. For the substats, we generally want crit rate and crit damage and HP percent. But if you are going for the speed setup or the Dance 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 setup for Tribbie, you are going to want a little bit of speed as well. All in all, she's relatively really easy to build, and she also has a lot of light cone options you can use to maximize your Tribbie. And speaking of light cones, we already talked about Dance Dance Dance, one of the best light cones in the game. Meshing Cogs, which is a 3-star light cone, is actually one of her best light cones and is actually very comparable to her signature light cone in terms of energy production for Tribbie. If you want a more in-depth breakdown of what that's like, check the video that I pointed out earlier about her energy situation, and you'll understand why Cogs is so strong on Tribbie, and it's actually one of the main ones that people are going to use on Tribbie. But aside from those 3 that I just mentioned, she can also take advantage of Bronze's signature light cone because it does have a 10% energy regen, and also she can take advantage of the Planetary Rendezvous for the mono quantum setup and for other future quantum DPSs that may come out later in the future. Because Tribbie's damage amplifiers are so strong and so good and so universal, she can pretty much slot into any team in the game because those apply to every single type of damage we currently have in the game. This includes break, it includes dot, it includes follow-up attack, it includes crit, whatever type of damage it is, it gets affected by vulnerability and it gets affected by resistance penetration. However, Tribbie does excel in scenarios where you are going to hit multiple targets, so she can launch more ultimates and more follow-up attacks. So naturally, a team like the Herda, which has 2 AoE hitters, is going to be a good spot for her, and she's actually a best in slot character for the Herda team. This team generally attacks frequently and attacks multiple enemies, so it's a perfect environment for Tribbie to shine. Similarly, any team that has multiple AoE units can be good for Tribbie. You can also run a team where the focus is to spam ultimates to launch tons of follow-up attacks for Tribbie. This includes Argenti, Serval, even Fei Zhao teams you can run Tribbie in. And even though this has a limit, there are ways to play around it, like pretty much holding your ultimate for not even a turn. You hold your ultimate for a few actions just in time to get the extra follow-up attack, and then you launch it and then you reset it again, and then that's pretty much all you have to do. You don't have to lose that much damage. And even if you do lose a follow-up attack or 2, the damage is not insane. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not game-breaking damage that you're losing by not launching an extra Tribbie follow-up attack. So even in Argenti teams, and Argenti is a character that pretty much launches his ultimate every turn, this won't be that much of an issue because Tribbie's follow-up damage isn't that great to begin with. So missing 1 or 2 is not that big of a deal. You can also use Tribbie in some teams involving Fei Zhao, like I said before, and Tribbie's follow-up attacks are AoE to help out Fei Zhao. Now this team will obviously perform a lot better with an AoE sustain like Adventurine or Lingsha, but you can also go sustainless in this type of comp, and you can throw Robin there in the last slot and your damage is going to be insane. You also have to take into consideration that Tribbie is going to more than likely be best in slot for characters like Mighty or Casterus, who are coming next in the next few patches. So if you are in the market of one of those characters, it is in your best interest to try and grab a copy of Tribbie at least. Lastly, her Eidolons are very, very strong, and almost all of them increase the overall damage of the team as well as her own overall damage. Her E1 is among the best Eidolons we have in the game. You get pretty much a 24% extra damage, and this is true damage, which means that it applies at the end of damage calculation. So for instance, if you were to be dealing 1,000,000 damage, you would deal 1,000,000 plus 240,000. So you would deal 1.24 million damage instead. This is a straight up 24% damage increase at the tail end after everything else and is unaffected by anything else. This massively helps AoE units deal with beefy, high HP single target enemies more effectively and is the single best vertical investment that you can get for your Tribbie, even above her signature light cone. And I will make a whole video on this, but I'll put out this one first. Her E2 increases the additional damage by 120% of itself. So for instance, if you were doing 100k in additional damage, now you're going to be doing 220k additional damage. It's pretty much more than doubles the additional damage. And aside from that, it makes it proc one more time, so it's actually more than doubling the additional damage. Her E4 gives you a 18% defense ignore while your skill is up, which should be indefinitely, like once you start the fight, you should have your skill up the entirety of the fight. And then her E6 is kind of like a selfish Eidolon and makes her follow-up deal 729% more damage and actually enables Tribbie to launch a follow-up attack after she uses her own ultimate. So this is pretty much a selfish Eidolon and makes her own personal damage skyrocket essentially. Honestly, if you are looking for any vertical investment on your Tribbie, the E1 is going to be single-handedly the best vertical investment you can do, even above her S1, like I've said before. And this is due to all of the Lycone options that Tribbie has at her disposal. All in all, Tribbie can squeeze into pretty much every team and can be competitive with their current best in slot for that team. Her damage amplification is among the highest and the most universal damage amplification kit we have in the game, because every single type of damage that happens in Honkai Star Rail gets affected via vulnerability and resistance penetration. So this includes literally any team in the game. Overall, Tribbie is looking to be a powerhouse of a Harmony character, and I strongly advise newer players and players that don't have at least 2 of the premium Harmonies to consider heavily going for at least an E0 copy of Tribbie, because she's the type of character that will bring tremendous value to your account, no matter what account it is. And as she currently stands, she's one of the best Harmony characters we have in the game. Now, thank you for watching my pre-release guide on Tribbie. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Check the links in the description. They got a bunch of useful stuff down there. And until next time, guys, see ya.